Okay, let's unpack this. Picture a seemingly normal Monday, midday, across Spain and Portugal, and then, well, without any warning, total blackout.
Yeah, just gone.
And we're not talking about a brief power dip here. This was a massive peninsula-wide outage.
Huge.
Think train stations in Valencia just brought to a standstill,
Yeah.
airports suddenly filled with bewildered travelers.
Total confusion, I bet.
Exactly. Even traffic lights in Madrid dead, prompting this urgent call for calm from the mayor.
Which tells you how serious it was straight away.
Right. This wasn't some localized glitch. It blanketed the entire Iberian Peninsula, affecting tens of millions. We even heard reports of ripples in southwest France.
And what immediately grabs your attention is just the sheer scale and the speed of this collapse. To have an entire peninsula plunged into darkness, simultaneously. That's not just inconvenient. It points to something potentially systemic, a really significant event.
Right.
We've gathered reports from CNN and France 24 English to really try and dig into what unfolded in those first crucial moments.
Yeah, piece together the early understanding of what went wrong.
Exactly. Our goal here is to, cut through that initial confusion and get to the heart of this pretty unprecedented event for you.
Okay. So the switch basically flipped off around 12:30 p.m. local time. Midday.
Terrible timing.
Everything just stopped.
Yeah.
Across countless towns and cities, Spain and Portugal, and the immediate impact on getting around. Huge.
Oh, I can imagine. Transport first, right?
Yeah, CNN reported Renfe, Spain's national railway, had to halt all train traffic nationwide.
Wow. Do we know how many that affects?
They operate over 1,000 trains daily,
Mm-hmm.
moving close to like 1.5 million people.
1.5 million. So the domino effect of that alone.
Exactly. And airports just became scenes of total uncertainty. Flights grounded, information just dried up.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, even that disruption to transport has knock-on effects.
For sure.
People stranded, supply chains interrupted, the whole economic pulse of the region just takes a sudden hit.
Definitely. And beyond that, just think about the everyday reliance on electricity. Schools had to close.
Right.
Businesses couldn't operate, shops, restaurants. Everything just went dark.
It really throws into sharp relief just how fundamental a stable power supply is to, modern life. You don't think about it until it's gone.
Totally. And it wasn't just transportation and commerce either. We heard reports that mobile phone services were affected.
Oh, right. So communication goes down too.
Seems like it, yeah. So as this blackout spread, a vital means of communication for many was also compromised.
Which is crucial in an emergency situation.
Then you've got the obvious safety issues. The mayor of Madrid's plea for calm wasn't just, rhetoric.
No, definitely not.
Non-functioning traffic lights in a major city like Madrid, that creates immediate and pretty serious hazards.
Yeah, that's a big one. And this raises an important question about the capacity of emergency services to respond effectively.
How do they even cope?
Well, with traffic signals down, potential communication breakdowns, how do first responders even navigate, let alone coordinate?
Right.
The mayor's request for clear roads and responsible use of emergency numbers, it just underscores the immense pressure placed on those vital services.
Yeah.
It highlights how interconnected everything is. A failure in the power grid can quickly strain other essential systems.
Okay, so the million-dollar question then. What in the world caused this?
That was the big mystery initially.
Initially, it was all speculation, right?
Well-
Authorities just saying investigations were underway.
But then some technical details started to emerge. RED Electrica, that's Spain's electrical provider.
Okay.
They reported a massive and sudden loss of 15 gigawatts of power generation
15 gigawatts. How fast?
in just 5 seconds, around 12:33 p.m.
5 seconds. Wow.
Yeah. And they stressed that this kind of abrupt drop had, quote, never happened before.
Never happened before. That's significant.
And that it represented about 60% of Spain's electricity needs at that exact moment.
60%. Gone in 5 seconds. That's an absolutely enormous amount of power to lose, like practically instantly.
That figure, 15 gigawatts vanishing in 5 seconds, it really underscores the scale of the instability we're talking about.
It's not a gradual fade.
No, not at all. It's an almost instantaneous and, catastrophic loss. Such a rapid event strongly suggests a major disturbance right within the core of the power grid itself.
And the initial hunches about the cause, they were quite diverse, weren't they?
Oh yeah, all over the place at first. Portugal's national grid operator floated the idea of a rare atmospheric phenomenon.
Atmospheric phenomenon. That sounds
Yeah.
a bit vague. Maybe a little out there.
Right. And at the same time, there was talk in Spain about a rapid 5 degrees Celsius jump in temperature just before the outage.
Could that do it?
Well, these initial speculations really show the uncertainty in those early moments. An atmospheric phenomenon could be almost anything, really.
True.
And while a sudden temperature swing might stress the system, it seems unlikely to be the sole trigger for such a widespread and immediate collapse.
Okay, so what did they eventually land on?
Well, Spain's electrical provider, RAD Electrica, they offered their explanation, a very strong oscillation in the network.
A strong oscillation. What does that mean exactly?
It points to a significant and pretty violent instability within the electrical network. Think of it like a sudden, powerful surge or disruption in the flow of electricity.
Like a huge wobble in the system.
Exactly. So intense that it tripped safety mechanisms designed to protect the wider European grid. It essentially severed Spain's grid from the rest of continental Europe, leading to a complete system-wide failure within Spain.
So it isolated itself and then collapsed.
Basically, yeah. The fact that it led to a total collapse indicates, maybe a potential lack of sufficient backup systems, or perhaps those systems just weren't able to react quickly enough to contain the problem.
Like a domino effect.
Precisely. One major disruption takes down the entire interconnected system within the peninsula, or at least large parts of it.
And getting the power back on, I guess that wasn't a simple flick of a switch either.
Oh, definitely not, understandably. It had to be a phased restoration.
Why is that?
Because putting that much capacity back online too quickly could have risked overloading the network again and causing, well, more problems. Another collapse, potentially.
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, imagine trying to restart a complex computer system after a major crash. You can't just hit the power button and expect everything to work perfectly.
Good analogy.
You need to bring components back online in a controlled sequence to avoid further damage. The power grid operates on this really delicate balance of supply and demand, and a sudden surge could destabilize the entire system all over again.
Now, what was particularly interesting was the international response, or lack thereof in some cases.
Right, the recovery efforts.
Spain was actually able to call on France and Morocco for emergency power to essentially reboot its networks.
Okay, so they got external help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Portugal, according to the reports we saw, had to handle the restoration process pretty much on its own.
That's interesting. That difference in their recovery efforts, it really highlights the level of interconnection, or perhaps the limitations, right?
Yeah.
Between their respective grids and the broader European network. Spain's ability to draw emergency power suggests some degree of integration, even if it wasn't enough to prevent the initial blackout.
But Portugal being on its own.
It suggests maybe a more self-contained system, or perhaps fewer readily available interconnection points for that kind of emergency support.
And this whole event, I mean, it really brought some potential vulnerabilities into sharp focus, didn't it?
Absolutely. The France 24 report specifically stated that this whole thing underlines deficiencies in Spain's power grid.
Deficiencies like what?
They characterized it as relatively isolated from the rest of Europe.
Relatively isolated.
And that relative isolation is a really key point here. A more interconnected grid can often absorb and, dampen the impact of localized disruption.
Because power can flow in from elsewhere.
Exactly. If one part of a large, well-connected network has a problem, other regions can step in to compensate and maintain stability.
But Spain's position.
Being more isolated made it more vulnerable to a cascading failure once that initial oscillation occurred. Less backup from the wider system.
It's also crucial, I think, to consider Spain's energy transition and all.
Yes, definitely.
Renewable energy sources now account for a significant chunk of their electricity generation, around 56%, I read.
Which is great, environmentally speaking.
For sure. But the report hinted that the necessary upgrades to system management and, the infrastructure, they might not have kept pace with this rapid shift in energy sources.
And this is a vital consideration, not just for Spain, but as countries everywhere transition to renewables.
True.
Integrating a high percentage of variable sources like solar and wind introduces new challenges for maintaining grid stability.
Because they aren't always on.
Precisely. These sources aren't always producing power consistently. So you need sophisticated grid management systems, you need energy storage solutions, robust interconnections, all essential to handle those fluctuations in supply and demand.
And if those upgrades lag behind.
Well, if they don't keep pace with the growth of renewables, they can indeed introduce new vulnerabilities into the system. The grid wasn't originally designed for this kind of mix.
So, okay, let's try and bring it all together then. We saw this massive, really sudden blackout engulfing Spain and Portugal.
Triggered immediate chaos.
Yeah, across transportation, daily life, even communication networks. While the initial cause was a bit murky,
Right.
it seems to stem from a really significant disruption within Spain's power grid, that colossal loss of generation, the powerful network oscillation.
Which effectively cut it off.
Right, and Spain started its recovery with help from France and Morocco, whereas Portugal had to manage independently. And this whole episode has really highlighted potential weaknesses in Spain's grid infrastructure, notably its relative isolation.
And the ongoing need for investment in system management, especially as renewable energy becomes increasingly central.
Precisely. So while we have a sort of preliminary understanding, there's still significant questions remaining, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely. What was the precise trigger for that initial very strong oscillation? That's still a bit unclear.
Yeah.
And what are the longer-term implications for the resilience of the Iberian power grid, especially as it continues to integrate more and more renewable energy sources?
It really underscores the inherent complexities in managing these huge modern power grids.
Definitely. And the potential for unexpected and, frankly, widespread disruptions.
So here's where it gets really interesting for you listening to think about. Considering just how much we all depend on these interconnected systems.
Everything, really.
Not just electricity, but communication, transportation. What potential vulnerabilities might we be overlooking in our own communities, in our own infrastructure?
That's the unsettling question, isn't it?
And as we collectively move towards cleaner energy sources, which is necessary, what can we learn from this extraordinary event in Spain and Portugal?
Yeah.
About that critical balance between embracing these new technologies and ensuring the underlying systems that deliver that power are actually robust and reliable enough to handle it.
It's a huge challenge. Finding that balance is key.
It's definitely something to consider long after this deep dive.